And good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you happenstance into this incredible panel discussion of which I'm calling the new Untouchables. My name is Patrick Lovell. I'm the producer of The Con that you can find at www.thecon.tv. And we're recording this on Tuesday, March 4th, 2025, approximately 3 hours before what I guess is the first State of the Union address of the second um, uh, term of President Donald Trump, and obviously a lot to consider given the speed and the really confusing and utterly um, unbelievable information that's coming at us fast and furious. So, just quick introductions, and like always, I'll put descriptions in the description section down below of who each of the panelists are. But I'll go opposite counterclockwise today. Starting in my lower right, Paul Pelletier is the former Department of Justice investigator and prosecutor with decades under his belt of going after white collar crime and organized crime, and currently a professor at George Washington University as well. Of course, Mark Dan of the Dan Law Firm, but a former attorney general of this great state of Ohio that has incredible insights in how to thwart organized corporate corruption. Then to my left, of course, the one and only William K. Black, criminologist out of the University of Kansas City, Missouri, as well as University of Minnesota, with incredible knowledge and degrees in economics and law. But yet, his really kind of bellwether of it all is the entry point to all things corruption that we're actually in the midst of and immersed in at the moment that has been going on for a very long time. And then below him is June Carbone, the Rabina Chair of Science, Law, and Technology at the University of Minnesota and the author of Fair Shake. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I wanted to start with you, Bill, just from the standpoint that we saw recently a huge kind of a platform PR initiative by Elon Musk as it relates to Doge, standing in front of the world with a chainsaw that seemed to have echoes of things that you taught us from years ago. Now, interestingly enough, I happened to see a meme that was being passed around on X of all things that I thought was very interesting in terms of your experience as well. And I don't know how accurate the numbers were, but it said President Clinton had reduced the size of the federal government by 330,000 employees, and yet nobody was crying about it then. That was in reference to all things Doge and what obviously the Trump administration is doing. Can you kind of use that as an entry point, looking back to Chainsaw Gillerin and the deregulation, desupervision, decriminalization era of which you came out of?
Okay, so that number you talked about, a significant number of the people that were removed from the federal government were the financial regulators. And this was quite deliberate by the President Clinton, but particularly Vice President Gore, who was the person actually in charge or at least, executive in charge of the effort to quote unquote reinvent government. And that the guy in the trenches was a guy named Stone, and he was selected after his first meeting ever, first discussion ever with Gore. When Stone gave Gore the famous advice, don't waste 1 second worrying about fraud and abuse and corruption. Okay, so what should you do? The demon was the inspector generals. And in particular, the inspector generals were the demons because they protected whistleblowers. And whistleblowers might get in the way of all of this kumbaya with industry because the key message that Stone pushed, that Gore adopted full-heartedly, was that we were to, and I was taught this expressly by them. They sent the revealed truth out to the field where I was at that time, was that we were to refer to the industry as our customer, and we were to treat them as a customer. And what Stone and all of those folks, including Gore, emphasized is the great sin that regulators had committed was that we treated, they claimed, CEOs as potential criminals. Well, everybody's a potential criminal, right? It it doesn't mean we treat you like criminals, but we do keep in mind that you have the potential to commit crimes. And in the savings and loan debacle and in the banking crisis, there were hundreds of CEOs that led these crimes, which is how this whole thing about control, fraud, and predation got created. So the Clinton-Gore administration first does war with the inspector generals. Then it trains everybody that they must treat the industry as their client and never think of CEOs as potential criminals. How's this going to sound good to you, Paul, when you got to those Enron era cases and such? Um, and that we had to eviscerate the federal working force of regulators. So they cut more than three-quarters of the total personnel of the FDIC. And they cut more than half of the total personnel of the Office of Thrift Supervision leading up to the great financial crisis. And then on top of that, they decided that they would gut examination. And then, now this next part occurs under Bush, they get rid of the criminal referral process that had been so helpful. And to their emblematic image of this in the banking regulatory sphere was the head of the thrift regulatory agency with the vice chairman of the Fed, I'm sorry, the FDIC, and the three leading bank lobbyists, all arrayed around a bunch of regulations, piled high to make them look intimidating. And in case it was too subtle, tied up in red tape. And everybody except Gilleran had huge pruning shears that you could chop off somebody's wrist with. But Gilleran, that wasn't enough for him. He had to hold a chainsaw to indicate that they were going to destroy all regulation, that we're going to think about it. Now, they didn't destroy all regulation, but they did destroy all enforcement of the regulation, and criminal referrals ended. And that's the classic example of how you create a criminogenic environment. And of course, Musk has learned that playbook, and we get the Argentine head of state who just days after his crypto scam brings his gold-plated chainsaw, and Musk, wearing glasses because I didn't want anybody to see his eyes, is going around like a whirling dervish on stage with this chainsaw and fantasizing about all the people and things and government programs he's going to cut. And yes, that will prove immensely criminogenic. So yes, the history repeats, but it repeats bad. It gets worse.
Well, June, I'm reminded of Mark Twain. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. But in this case, it's literally like what I interpreted Donald Trump running for the 2016 election when suddenly he pivoted to, basically repeating what Bernie Sanders had been saying out on the campaign trail, but slightly tweaked to the disenfranchised white working class. And I'm wondering through your long lens, in the rear view, but looking forward with all of the details of what you have, could you ever imagine that we literally see a fusion of Jack Welch and, quite frankly, what Bill had just described playing out before our eyes with the richest man in the world who is not our president, but obviously acting as the CEO that, it looks to me like Project 2025 got exactly what they wanted while Trump is on the golf course, but apparently about to give us a State of the Union.
Well, I think what the gift Musk gives is he's making visible what the American political system has been like since the election of Ronald Reagan. And that is with each turn of the screw, what you have is a system of deregulation that puts billionaires in charge. And so I want to go back with the stories Bill are telling. He and I went together to Canberra, Australia, uh, which Australian National University has one of the greatest white-collar criminology centers in the world. And there were a group of people who had come from all over the world to study deregulation. And what they found in every country is if you deregulate, it takes more regulators to avoid a complete disaster. If you regulate finance and say, we're going to give you deposit insurance, but those entities that accept deposit insurance have to stay out of investment banking, stay out and divide commercial real estate loans from housing loans, then that regulation makes it easy to regulate. But if you say all the rules are gone, but we're still giving you deposit insurance, and we're not going to closely monitor what you do, you invite disasters. This is true in aviation. It's true, with airline deregulation. It's true with banking. And so what we're seeing now is what's been happening behind the scenes. Take the first Trump administration. The one thing he got through were massive tax cuts. He also got, without anybody noticing too much, a whole lot of deregulation for donors. I like to study Walmart. What happened to Walmart? The Obama administration had adopted some regulations to try to contain ever so slightly Walmart's complete evisceration of labor protections. First thing Trump did was to get rid of them. So what you're seeing now up front, but on steroids, is a mindset that has governed corporate America for the last 40 years. We're the great men. People that regulate us are the Lilliputians standing in the way of progress. Get rid of them.
Right. And the only bulwark to that, Paul, is the Department of Justice that has incredible resources that, conceivably with the power that it wields, could easily, with the resources that Congress would, if they saw this problem clearly, would work lock and step, I would think, to provide the amount of firepower necessary, at least budget wise. And I'm not sure how that would work, but to be able to deal with this onslaught of corporate corruption that's been happening for decades, but yet you've been in the midst of it. Bill just talked about Enron. I mean, I know you were at the apex of the AIG investigation. And here we are today where everybody is asking, whether it's Rachel Maddow on down the line, is why is it possible, or how is it possible that the entirety of checks and balances and the rule of law are not in position to thwart what is obviously illegal? And I wonder if you could address that as, reflecting what we're going to see from Trump tonight in the State of the Union.
Well, I don't know what we're going to see tonight. It's going to be clownish, whatever it is. But, when you put people in positions of power who are simply loyalists and loyal to the office of the presidency more than they are to the Constitution, you're going to have problems, particularly in the Department of Justice. And if you've listened to anything that Pam Bondi has said in the past couple of weeks, it's very clear that she is taking her marching orders from Donald Trump, and she is going to root out those people who investigated or prosecuted him, and those people who don't agree with Donald Trump's agenda, whether it's legal or not. So I don't have a lot of hopes for where the Department of Justice is going. I will say that it's probably you're probably better off in a U.S. Attorney's office in South Dakota now than you are in sort of a high-profile office in New York or Washington, D.C., where all of your actions are going to be scrutinized as it relates to going after corporate crime or high-level white-collar crime. Tomorrow, I'm going to go to the white collar crime conference in the ABA in Miami. I think it'll be very interesting to listen to what people have to say down there. But I think there's a lot of hand wringing amongst the big firms as to sort of what they're going to do if the department truly stops going after Foreign Corrupt Practices Act crimes and or sort of the kleptocracy type of crimes. I think if whatever you do is high profile enough, Pam Bondi's going to shut it down. But it'll be interesting to see what the masses are saying when I get there tomorrow. I might have more to report next time.
Well, a quick follow-up though to that was you warned us, 2 months before the election what was going to happen, and you've since said, well, let's let the floor drop out. Are you surprised at the speed and the overwhelming everything that seems to be behind this? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I know how I would describe it. I'll just leave it there.
I'm not surprised at the speed. He's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. He's going to root out all the FBI agents who investigated him. The only thing that surprised me, and I guess it shouldn't have in retrospect, is that the Senate is confirming these clowns. I did not expect that they would confirm Kash Patel. I did not. Well, they certainly weren't going to. Maybe they wouldn't have confirmed Matt Gaetz. But no, I mean, that's Pete Hegseth. I mean, these people who are not ready for anything, never mind prime time in the jobs that they are. And by the way, these people are such loyalists and such lapdogs for Trump. That's where corruption both enters and festers. But anyway, that's the only thing that surprised me, the fact that they were so easily confirmed.
Patrick, can I offer a more pessimistic view?
Yeah.
We've lost the battle over. They have taken control of the regulatory apparatus of the federal government in a way that we simply can't unfuck until at least until the midterms, and probably until after Trump's out of office, one way or the other. What I'm more concerned about is defeating the next step of the plan. The Project 2025 folks. I don't know if anybody saw the Lever or listened to the Lever podcast series about the history of how the corporate community has very systematically planned to take over the courts, have systematically planned what ended up resulting in Project 2025 as a working document. But those goals have been in place for 20 years, and this has been a steady, well-funded effort over time to co-opt the levers of regulatory control to prevent anybody from interfering with the financial activities of the very rich people in this country. And the very rich people have funded it. And I mean, the Citizens United decision was part of that plan. I mean, you just can come back in history. What's not part of their plan, and what I think is where we may reunite with our business leaders here. I don't know if anybody saw the message that Trump posted this morning about college campuses, and that any college campus that allows protests will be shut down or will be cut off of federal funds. He is in the constant poking and prodding of protests around the country. The thing he wants the most is for large violent protests to arise so that he can justify and Hegseth getting rid of the lawyers at the Department of Defense. He wants to mobilize the army against the American people to suppress any dissent, and I think these folks, and including those senators who continue to spend their days and weeks licking Trump's boots, are going to really, when that movement starts and we can't stop it, they'll come back to patriotism. And join us in trying to stop this. I mean, I think the stuff we worried about over the last 5 years or 10 years is just it's a rounding error compared to the massive mobilization of the suppression of dissent that is planned, and if somebody doesn't fucking grow up in the U.S. Senate and in the judiciary, it's gonna happen. And I've gone from joking about where we're going to go to making serious inquiries about where to go. Not that I'm going to go, but I want my kid. I would like my kids to be safe. I want my I want my the folks that that don't have the capabilities to fight the way that I do. I mean, they'll take me down, shooting back. I can tell you that. But and I don't even own a gun. But I might get one at this point. That's what I mean. So this is quaint. What we were concerned about in the con is quaint in comparison to what's happened here. They've done it. They have control. And the question is, when is the corporate community going to wake up? Because their ability to make unlimited money will come to an end the moment Trump declares martial law, and they don't have an ability to produce goods. Only the favored companies will be able to do business, and we're already seeing that. I mean, the Panama Canal was maybe the largest example of kleptocracy in the history of the United States. I mean, the BlackRock paid a pretty penny for the opportunity to do that, and what do? You're the president of Panama. What other choices do you have? When there's war in Europe, that's something that I think Trump is inviting, because it would further his effort to take this to the next level. I don't think any of the folks that wrote Project 25 or supported this 20 to 30 year effort to deregulate the country in a radical way understand that the vehicle they've chosen is about to crash into a great big wall.
That was incredibly powerful, and you leapfrogged where I was hoping we'd go in this conversation. But kudos to you and your bravery for saying what needs to be said. And I'm going to follow up just briefly, and then I look forward to everybody else's reaction there. But so what you're saying is, and this is what I try to tell everybody that is surprised by the shock and awe of how we perceive this as being a quick hijacking of the federal government. But like you've pointed out, no, it's been a 30-year play of which you all have been a part of trying to prevent, at different levels of success throughout the entire time. But what you didn't have behind you, although you were working with the federal government and you would think that the media would champion the truth every chance that it got, you didn't have a cadre of international billionaires supporting one-dimensional chess for the outcome of you completely controlling what you just described. So quickly, you had pointed out, and this was also dovetailing into what Bill taught us last week or revealed to us, that as giant as the con is, that we might be in a bigger scenario with crypto. That is the next step. In addition to all of the pensioners that you're involved with are already being plugged in of what is obviously a fraud. Can you address that?
Well, yeah, there's that. There's also I don't know if anybody saw the Wall Street Journal article Sunday about the that big Las Vegas. Remember in The Big Short, the big Las Vegas conference where all the investment bankers gathered. Well, they had the largest one of those since 2008, and 10,000 investment bankers, all touting to one another asset-backed securities of varying safety levels. So you take the crypto, you take the repeat of collateral-backed securities as a means of financing everything, and they've expanded it well beyond housing to the entire economy, the data centers that are being built, so that's another of the, if the economy's or if the, crypto's one leg and the Federal Reserve is a second leg and Wall Street's the third leg. I mean, that's gonna break the Wall Street leg of the three-legged chair. And again, that is exactly what Trump and Steve Miller and the other 5 people that really get what the plan is here. That's what they want, because it will further enable them to engage the emergency powers. I think that their fantasy would be to cancel the 2026 elections.
Right, among other things. I mean, and I don't see how any of us can think that we have a chance at free and fair elections given everything that's already happened in the last 4 years since the insurrection. I've said that previously. But Bill, do you have any reaction to that and any foresight? I mean, it seems like
Sure. Let me extend the pessimism. So first for the wonks, yes, we know it's not officially a State of the Union address because it's the first January address after the election. So it's a joint session address officially. Okay. Anyway, this is not 20 years. This is the Powell Memorandum. And the Powell Memorandum was finished in 71, but began in 1970. So it is literally 55 years in the making. And guess what prompted the Powell Memorandum? Prosecutions for elite white-collar crime and Ralph Nader calling out elite white-collar crime and saying it ain't just money. People die, right? When you have bad designs in automobiles. So this is something we try to get across as criminologists, that fraud and corruption can lead, and not only can, but do actually cause far more deaths than blue collar crimes do. So what are the Powell Memorandum, as I said, goes through what is Powell pictured, and Powell becomes
the wonks,
associate
Bill,
justice.
Let me add a footnote for the wonks. That's Lewis Powell, who
Yeah.
ultimately became a Supreme
That's
Court
what I was
justice.
just, yeah, that's what I was just explaining.
As lawyer for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, wrote the Powell memo. So for those wonks, I want to make sure we're clear on which Powell and which memo. So
exactly. So they come to him because he is such a doyen of corporate power in the United States, and they feel they're losing, and they feel they're losing to this Lebanese immigrant. It's just utterly outrageous from their perspective. This guy shouldn't even be talking. And the Powell Memorandum's angst has to do specifically with Nader saying that CEOs can be crooks. So we're back exactly at this recurrent theme that we're not supposed to be able to view CEOs as crooks, and that anybody who wants to prosecute them or even investigate them is definitionally completely outside acceptable practice. Heritage Foundation, ever since the Powell Memorandum, has referred to white-collar crime as a Marxist idea because it's got class in it. It's just a nonsensical thing, but they want the entire concept to be unacceptable, right? That anything that would view elite CEOs as anything other than the appropriate and responsible and reliable people that should be running the world is precisely what they want to defeat in all of this. And what do they want instead? Well, if CEOs can't be crooks, and if they're smarter than the regulators, and the regulators are dumb and lazy, et cetera, then you should run it like a CEO runs it. And as June explained last time, what Alan Greenspan and everybody else says is CEOs of modern corporations are dictators. And that's a compliment from their perspective, not an attack. Just like Musk wasn't hiding that he was going to go around with a chainsaw destroying government. Chainsaw is not a precision instrument. Chainsaw is not something you do to create efficiency. It's just a slash and burn. Similarly with that photo I talked about, with the heads of the regulators literally working hand in hand to destroy any effective regulation with the three leading bank lobbyists. They weren't ashamed of that. They put that in the annual report of the FDIC as the glowing picture to show what was coming, right? And that was both major parties taking exactly that approach. So, yeah, yes, it's as every bit as bad. And yes, this is Trump who wanted the generals to shoot Americans last time he was in office. But last time in office, the generals said no. This time, the generals will say yes, in part, as you say, because the legal corps, the specialized legal corps in the military services, will be eviscerated, and the people that are left in will be in charge of the cover-up.
Come on, Bill. You just wanted him to shoot him in the legs.
No, that was the second position.
Uh,
No, he wanted them shot, and the general said no, and he said, "Well, what about just shooting them in the legs?" So this is also someone that has no concept of what a high velocity round
right,
from an
right.
AR-15 or an M4 carbine does when it strikes a bone. It could kill you simply from the shock that propagates through your body, right? This is insane, as well as diabolical and inhuman and such.
Well, June, to the point that Mark made, just setting up something that becomes, an opportunity for Trump to literally shoot people in the public square, so to speak, demonstrating this whole thing. I'm. It seems like on the one hand, this has been happening the whole time, at least the ramp up to it, but at the same time, it's like the worst it's ever been. I guess my first question to you, in your lifetime or in American history, have we seen anything remotely this over the idea of what America is? I mean, it's this full on autocracy. This is the death of law. This is the death of everything that we hold dear.
You certainly have to go back before the New Deal. But let me emphasize, I think what we're talking about are really two things that operate together, but are different in certain important ways. One is Trump. Trump and Vance think of themselves as, hey, want to be Putin's. Um, and the assertion of power is the point. Elon Musk is a little bit different and maybe farther reaching. So one of the things that I think is interesting when we look at what happened, what happened to corporate America, and I described last time we spoke the rise of Jack Welch at the point where U.S. industry was viewed as no longer competitive globally, and we had too much bureaucracy, and we had to cut through it. And cheering on Jack Welch, who, got rid of a whole lot of employees, brought in his new guys, cooked the books, and was the toast of Wall Street. But Silicon Valley is different. Silicon Valley didn't have grown-ups. Silicon Valley's origin story is somebody designing brilliant things in a garage in Palo Alto. And when you look at the venture capital model, it celebrates the person who comes in, takes charge, goes from 0 to 60 instantly. What VCs want from startups is they look for that which can be scaled up. You move in, you hope to come up with something new, you outflank established businesses, and you then are the dominant player everybody else has to deal with. That's what Musk is doing, the shock and awe. This is classic venture capital stuff. Let me talk a little bit about Uber because Uber just exemplifies it. Uber had a great app. Most of us like Uber a whole lot better than traditional taxi companies. I certainly do. But the key to Uber's success isn't the app. They could have sold it to a taxi company. What they did instead is they outflanked the taxi companies. They originally started in San Francisco, and the taxi company said, you're a taxi company. You got to play by the rules. So what they did is they changed the name and said, we're not a taxi company. That means we don't have to obey the regulations. We don't have to treat our workers as employees. We get to make our own playbook. And what did they do? Overnight. I mean, the whole idea of Uber is you move into a new territory, you scale up as quickly as possible, you have lots of loyal customers, and then when the taxi companies get around to working with the regulators to say, oh, Uber shouldn't be allowed at the airport, you get a whole bunch of angry customers who come in and say, we want our Ubers. Okay. The key to this is you complete contempt for the law. You don't even bother to find out what the laws you're breaking are. You have to scale up incredibly quickly. If you don't, you're toast. If you succeed, what you hope for is monopoly power. Jeff Bezos played a long game in building Amazon to the point where it was so pervasive. He lost money for over a decade, but got new rounds of Silicon Valley funding.
Over
2 decades. The key was getting to the point where you're the 1,000-pound gorilla. That's essentially what Musk did. Now what Musk did with Tesla is the key is to move into this new market, scale up incredibly quickly, ignore safety regulations, put up with product safety recalls. But the key is doing it fast. Beating expectations was rewarded on Wall Street, but doing it fast outflanked your would-be competitors, at least in the American market. So if you think of that whole mindset, that's what Musk is doing. And Musk is doing real damage that, as we've discussed, is going to take forever. I mean, putting it back together, that's something that could take decades. What Trump is doing is different. And I think Trump is building toward, Trump wants to be Putin. Trump admires Putin. And I think looking for the right provocation to send in the troops is exactly right. But what's the end game? Is it dissolving Congress? If it's winning elections, we already have Jim Crow back with voter suppression throughout the South. And, if you look at gerrymandering in Wisconsin and in North Carolina, you already have destroyed one man, one vote, one person functioning democracy in many states in the US already. What's the next step after the troops get sent out? That's the question I'm asking.
Paul, I want to ask you, as your career and your illustrious career fighting organized crime, based on what you also know in white collar fraud, what June just had amplified by way of, boy, I didn't hear a big difference there in, venture capitalists and tech bros and corporatocracy and organized crime. What's that look like from your vantage, especially with investigations, because of the speed in which June had, obviously laid out the reality of?
Look, I think what everybody's saying is sort of what's happening today is what has been happening for the past 30 years on steroids, right? So I remember watching Eric Holder during the great financial crisis when we're supposed to be prosecuting these financial institutions. And we had Jamie Dimon's financial institution allegedly under investigation. I remember him welcoming Jamie Dimon into the Department of Justice, hugging him, shaking. I mean, what was even the purpose of that, right? I mean, lawyers settle cases. There's no business. Jamie Dimon has no business meeting with the attorney general while his company's under investigation. It's ridiculous. But that type of behavior has been fostered by both Democrat and Republican administrations alike. And they've all been in bed with this big money, whether it be credit card businesses, whether it be banks, they've all been in bed with it for years. So this is not a new phenomenon. It's obviously an old phenomenon on steroids, but this has been going on for a long time. I think I agree what with June. She said, when she said this might be broken for decades, right? And that's what I fear. And again, everybody here is a pessimist. I'm still a little bit of an optimist. I haven't tried to get my Canadian passport reinstated, but I think that if things go the right way in 2026, then there's a possibility to at least start getting ground back. But if you're asking me how to fix things, I have no clue at
No,
this.
I wasn't asking you how to fix things. I was asking you from the central position of being somewhat of a quarterback of one of the most important aspects of the DOJ. And I want to follow this up to you, Mark, as well, because you had the catbird seat as the state attorney general with criminal prosecutorial, aspects, given what the other states can and can't do, i.e., what we discovered in the con. But the if our government, right, cannot battle. What you're saying is the war is lost. That's what I'm hearing. The war is lost because the money has completely taken over. But those of us who think in terms of constructs of the economy as well, okay, to what ends? Because then it collapses. Well, who does it collapse on? And who gets?
So I think that, and I'm going to turn this over to Mark, but I think state prosecutors, state attorney generals are going to be the vanguard right now for keeping a check on some of this criminal behavior in white collar crimes. I just think that that's where it's going to have to be, and it's going to be in the blue states. That's my view.
Well, and let me turn a corner to something a little more optimistic as well.
Thank you.
So the thing a dictator likes the least is to be dictated to. And so all those corporate dictators are going to not be happy when they've gotten their wish now, and they should enjoy today, where they have free reign and they can go out and make money. But when they have to please the king and give him his cut, and the kleptocracy grows more and more aggressive in its efforts to liberate their piece of the economy, to Trump and his continuingly limited group of oligarchs, we're going to recapture the patriotism of the American business community. I think there's a great chance that will happen, because these people at the end of the day, I mean, they go home, they kiss their kids goodnight, and they have moms and dads who fought in wars to protect this country, and some of them themselves fought in wars to protect this country, and there is a fundamental layer of patriotism that I still believe exists there. So I think that's a positive thing. I agree also, Paul, that state AGs and county prosecutors around the country, local DAs and prosecutors, I think will play a significant role, and have in filling some of the gaps. And in response to June's concern, yes, we're running elections with one hand tied behind our backs, but if the election were held today, I think the response and the rebellion to Trump and his folks would be so significant that it would overcome those Jim Crow restrictions. So we have to not only win, but we have to win really big in order to turn that tide as well. So there are places where this can be headed off. But until some of those folks on Capitol Hill grow some courage, and the Democrats grow some ability to engage in a strategic plan, we're going to have to wait until it gets worse before it can get better, unfortunately.
Bill, you qualified that last week as, in the form of honor and patriotism as well. Take us home. Moving forward, Bill, you've been there, done that. What can we do?
Well, so this was our problem. Our head of enforcement, my phrase for that entire office under her was they were the land of the invertebrates, right? Have you ever been in an agency where the business types want to get the enforcement attorneys involved? They're supposed to be the junkyard dogs. Right. But in the savings and loan debacle, they always were trying to get the enforcement staff to come in because they knew they would screw up the case. So, apropos that, yes, our hope, I think, is very much at the state AG level, and frankly, far more than the county level. But the other side is going to be looking to create those pretexts and create that real fascist government. And the constitutional sheriffs are a wild card, right? That may start arresting people they just don't like. And in the old days, the federal government would come in to get you out of that circumstance potentially. That ain't going to happen. So in the really red states, with the quote unquote constitutional sheriffs who have these, I won't go through the ideology, but just weird and nasty type stuff, they're going to create crises. And I also want to mention one other thing we haven't made explicit about the Powell Memorandum. Powell Memorandum didn't just say, here's the problem. It said, here's how to fix it. And the fix it was, we need to use our paramount economic power to take over the institutions. We need to control the universities. That's coming big time, folks. Right? It's already started, but it's going to come big, big time. And we need to take over all the networks, right? We need to take over not just the news, but the popular programming. I mean, we're a number of us are old enough that we grew up with FBI programs, which J. Edgar Hoover actually sort of scripted behind the scenes to create the mythology of all agents are special at the FBI, right? Type of stuff. Okay, so these opponents are competent at their strategic vision. And they are audacious in the idea that not only should we rule, but here's how we will take power. So there're going to have to be efforts on multi levels. And as June said, I also endorse it. What Trump can break in 4 years, even if that's the end of Trumpism, if it best scenario burned out, people who have not been inside the federal government do not understand what a treasure significant elements were and how they were created over decades of tradition and ethos and improvement. They weren't static. And that's going to be gone. So, Paul, can you just explain what, for example, I think it was the U.S. attorney in D.C., right? What he did to the top prosecutors in reassigning them to the misdemeanor beat.
So that type of activity ruins the entire ethos of the office, right? And it does it for a long, long time. And so people just hunker down, and no longer is it make the good cases, make the big cases, just stay out of trouble. It creates a system of public service that is precisely what they say exists now, and they want to root out. It creates that. You get a bunch of busy people not making a difference out there, and that's the best way to survive. Or people that are sort of agitators that are going to do whatever bootlicking they need to do. So yes, and it it took me every time I went into either a section or a division within the attorney's office or DOJ. It literally took me 3 to 4 years to rebuild it from what it was, and then you leave and then you find out, hey, Paul, these things are happening. So it doesn't take long to take away that spirit and that ingenuity that we all took pride in, which is, like you just said, the treasure of public service, right? And it doesn't take long to destroy it. And then building it back up, it's going to take a long time.
Well,
Yeah,
And
can I comment on what happens next too? Because I think we do have to look back at history. When you go back to the Gilded Age, it was incredibly corrupt. And it led not to one disaster, it led to a series of disasters. There was the financial panic of what, 1893 and then 1907, and then the Great Depression. And Roosevelt was able to fundamentally change things, not simply because he had both houses of Congress and eventually the Supreme Court and a master plan, whether he did or not is arguable, but because the financial crisis occurred. The stock market debacle was in 1929. Roosevelt took office in 1933, in part because what the Fed did and tariffs and the protectionism of the age made things worse. Herbert Hoover believed that there was nothing the government could do about the Depression and shouldn't really try. And when Roosevelt comes into office, the Joseph P. Kennedy, the father of President Kennedy, is supposed to have said, I would give up half of everything I own to keep the other half. He was a very wealthy man, but he felt the Depression endangered everything he had. So what you had was a crisis. And the key to what followed is not just good ideas, have Social Security, regulate companies, but the two lasting things that made a huge difference were huge marginal tax rates. Marginal tax rates that by the height of World War II were 90% and did not begin to come down until Kennedy lowered taxes initially in the 60s and then Reagan gutted taxes in the 80s. So what that did is to limit the power of individuals to accumulate immense resources. The second thing, again, as I was talking about regulation, pervasive regulation and regulation of finance in particular. Finance is the easiest thing to gain. Today, we have the part of Silicon Valley that is truly out of control is the venture capital sphere. That's finance. And when you talk about crypto, that's finance. Finance is the place that can produce booms and busts and Ponzi schemes and a variety of other things quickly. And so what you've got is the New Deal came in and you had a 50-year period of effectively regulation of finance in a way that eliminated, until the savings and loan crisis, fraud-fueled financial booms. And the high marginal tax rates for a long time created a different ethos and a different power structure. We are now back to the power structure of 1900. And in going back to that power structure, there will be disasters. Trump could easily set off a global depression at this point if things go as we think they might. The question is, what do you come in and replace Trump with? You need the disaster to have the opportunity to control and put the bad apples in jail. Without the disaster, the power won't be there.
from the end of the Civil War in 1865 to the beginning of World War I, 1914, so roughly 50 years, the United States was in recession half of those years. Can you imagine a period like that? Right? And what all of us have been explaining in terms of the unique advantages the United States had because it had the capacity to take even the most powerful executives who had become criminals and were corrupting government and to prosecute them without fear or favor and to actually win, in many cases, those prosecutions. I just mentioned again what Paul and I talked about last time. Whenever people like us went internationally and told those stories, our counterparts were amazed. They were in awe of what was possible in the United States. It was a resource to make the rule of law meaningful, to keep a limit on corruption. Obviously, we didn't remotely eliminate corruption. To allow a functional democracy in which the kleptocrats, the billionaire class, didn't simply run everything, right? We have not just tossed that away, we're perverted it into a weapon that's going to be used to go after, well, people like us that try to, prevent these kinds of problems. And it's going to take us decades to recreate it. So A, we got to win, and B, and we have to rebuild. Recreate is the wrong word, but rebuild those kind of capacities and those kinds of mores, right? The professional mores of the Department of Justice, of the Attorney General's offices and such, are of immense value, not just in prosecuting successfully, also in not abusing your power. We actually think a lot about not abusing our power, whereas Trump glories in abusing power.
Does anybody have any final comments? Well, I'll just say to the audience,
we can cut off Jurassic Park or the story of Frankenstein before the dinosaurs or the monster gets loose. I mean, that's I think our last chance here.
well, and again, and I hate to give this last kind of comment to Eric Holder, but I was dumbstruck, absolutely dumbstruck, when Eric Holder came out 7 months before the election and said, our institutions aren't going to be able to rein Trump in. It's up to the American people. Never mind the source, the message was right, because it's going to take the critical mass of an informed populace that's gleaning the information from the professionals that have been there, done that have the vision of knowing how to do this, working in concert with politicians that rise to the top with this information to create what are the populist movements that are going to have to purge the criminality and the corruption that is now fueling this autocracy that may lead to fascism, if we're going to call it that. But it's not the United States that I grew up in. It's not the United States of integrity. It's not the United States of honor. It's not the United States of patriotism. And I agree with everybody here that all of that has to infuse in our citizenship. And we're going to have to share. We're going to have to get involved. We're going to have to champion these individuals. And we're going to have to get this through the seams and the cracks of the algorithm that is preventing the truth from getting to the people that need to hear it most. Anyone else?
Yes, what I'd like to see tonight at this event is that when Trump mentions Ukraine, Democrats say shame.
That'd be great. I'll get this out there as quickly as possible. Hopefully that'll resonate. All the best to you, and I'll be in touch next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.